I gave the nurse the keys to the apartment and found that all my jewelry was gone. She stood in the doorway with a sweet smile that hid her crimes. "You shouldn't raise your hands yet, Mrs. Kovalenko," she said, examining the bruises from my fall. "I'll put your things away. You rest." I watched her take the keys off the hook by the stove, the same hook my husband had installed with a laugh and a crooked nail, and urged me to be grateful for help I didn't need. The next morning, the velvet boxes on the dresser were empty. My wedding ring box gaped empty, a dent in the satin like a mouth frozen in a scream. The pearl earrings my mother had given me for my 50th birthday were gone. The silver cross I had worn to every baptism and funeral was gone. I stood perfectly still because I didn't know what to do. She came in at noon with broth and pity. "Have you lost something, dear?" Her gaze darted to the dresser and back, too quickly. "Post-op fog is normal. All my jewelry is gone," I said. She tried to laugh, but it wasn't her laugh. "Maybe your daughter moved it for safekeeping." "My daughter lives 2 towns away and thinks pearls are old-fashioned." I sighed and felt a pain flare in my ribs. "Where did you put my jewelry?" Her smile faded. "I'm here to help you." "If you're going to blame me..." "Blame?" I let the word hang between us. "I'm asking, how many times do they look at us, at our pill organizers and soft shoes, and think that the mind softens along with the bones? How could the one I trusted to bathe me steal the last warm piece of my husband's hand?" She began to tidy up, small, noisy movements, as if trying to block the air. "I can make a list of everything you think is missing." "I already made a list," I said. "And the photographs." I tapped the frame on the dresser behind the glass. My granddaughter's smile obscured the edge of the printed inventory. The appraisal reports were in an envelope taped under a drawer. The receipts were in a folder, so boring no thief would open it. Gas bills, 2014 to 2016. She didn't know about the neighbor who watered my flowers and noticed faces. She didn't know I had a spare key on another keychain, or that the security camera in the hallway was pointed directly at my door. She didn't know that the locks had changed with a soft click earlier that morning before she arrived, and that the manager had silently pocketed his thanks in cash. "Finish your soup," she said, a little too cheerfully. "Oh, I'll call," I said, "after I'm done talking." She tilted her head. "Who?" "To the person who taught me never to hand anyone the keys to my life without a receipt." I let her hear the first ring. She set down the clipboard, the smile slipped. And that's when the plan that began with a fall and a borrowed kindness began to show its teeth. But to understand how the keys ever left the hook by the stove, I have to go back to the beginning. 2 weeks earlier, I was standing on a kitchen chair, reaching for the big pot I use once a year to make plum jam, when the world tilted and refused to right itself. The chair pitched, the pot clanged, and I went down with a sound I recognized too late as my own voice. On the floor, breathless, I could feel the kitchen tile cold through my dress. The ceiling light spun like a restless moon. "Stay there," I told myself. Ridiculous, because where else would I go? And then I laughed, because that's what I do when fear tries to climb into the room. The laugh turned into a cough. The cough turned into silence. I looked at the front door and thought about the little chain my husband insisted on. I thought about all the keys in my life and how they've always been heavier than they look. It was my neighbor, Lev, who found me. He's 73, a retired electrician with hands like walnut shells. He waters my spider plant when I forget and brings me newspaper clippings about electrical fires and what to look for in crooked contractors. He has a wife somewhere who remarried, children somewhere who send cards at odd times, and a way of standing as if he expects a wire to spark underfoot. "Door was open," he said, kneeling, breath smelling of mint tea. "You were late feeding the cats in the yard." That orange one was making speeches. "I slipped," I said. He looked at the chair, the pot on its side, the smear of jam where the jar had exploded. "You fell," he corrected gently. "We're calling the clinic." At the clinic, they dressed me in a gown that smelled faintly of bleach and lavender hand cream. A doctor, with a beautiful plait of gray hair, told me I'd bruised ribs, strained muscles, frightened my heart. You need rest, she said. Someone should be with you for a while. Do you have family? I have a daughter, Lilia, who loves me more from a distance than up close. Her job is all late night calls and early flights. She calls me on the taxi ride to the airport, breathless and apologetic, and promises weekends that crumble like cookies in a pocket. She insisted on sending help. Just until you're steady, she said when we spoke by video that night. I found a home care service. They're insured, they do background checks, they text me the care plan. Let me do this, mama, please. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I'll be fine with Lev knocking twice a day and the cats outside making speeches. But the pot on the floor and the bruise spreading under my ribs convinced me to say yes. That is how Marina entered my kitchen. Brisk, gentle hands, sunny voice, eyes that studied the corners of rooms. The first day she brought soup. The second day, she brought a clipboard with boxes, bathing, dressing, medication administration, home safety. She asked where I keep extra towels. She asked who holds my spare keys. It helps, she said, if I can lock up after I leave. The agency requires it. She was 30, maybe 32, with hair the color of burnt sugar braided down her back. Her voice had the patience of someone used to coaxing stubborn children into shoes. When she smiled, her mouth made a careful shape, as if a smile had weight and needed balancing. I watched her wash my dishes, hands confident, movements economical. Keys are by the stove, I said, and my mouth felt colder than the tile had. She slid the ring off the hook. I'll just make a copy, she said, in case I get sent on a late shift and the downstairs door jams. The superintendent knows me. The superintendent knows me, I said. He knows that door. She tilted her head, that listening gesture that makes your words feel like coins dropping into a box. Of course, she said. We do everything by the book. Maybe I should have refused then. Maybe I should have told her that books can be rewritten by hands no one sees. But I was tired and wanted the soup and the lightness of being looked after for one afternoon. And it is hard to say no when the word you want is pride, wearing a sensible dress and good shoes. That week, little things shifted. My ladle moved from the second drawer to the first. My shawl, which I keep on the back of the sofa for the evenings, migrated to a chair in the bedroom. The house felt as if someone had straightened it while I blinked. I told myself, this is what help looks like. I told myself not to be ungrateful. On the third day, she asked for my medication list. Sometimes pharmacies change suppliers, she said, and pills look different. I like to be sure I handed her the list. She examined the labels and added check marks on her clipboard. I'll pre-fill your organizer, she said. You shouldn't have to fuss. My doctor prefers I do it myself, I answered. She's right, Marina said, all agreement and sweetness. I'll just help today. When you have lived long with responsibility clattering in your pockets, it is a relief to hand a small piece of it to someone else. But it is also a risk. I watched her shake 2 extra little white pills into Monday morning. I watched her hesitate, glance at me, then correct it. Later, alone, I counted. Every capsule, every tablet. I put 2 of the little white pills in a bag in the freezer next to the blueberries. Insurance, I told myself, against the fog that never seemed to touch me before but now hovered just beyond the kitchen door. On the 4th day, she came without knocking. You gave me the keys, she called, as if a key is permission forever. I thought of my husband, who worked with locks for 35 years, who could open a frozen deadbolt with a hairdryer and a patient heart. Never give anyone a key without a receipt, he used to say. If there's no paper, there's no proof, and without proof, there's no getting it back. I had given her the keys without a receipt. On the 5th day, my ring was gone. The day my husband proposed, late spring, rain washing the city like a baptism, he slid a ring onto my finger that his mother had worn and his grandmother before her. The gold was thin from other lives, the diamond small and stubborn. I wore it through 2 pregnancies, 1 miscarriage, 1 funeral, 30,000 dinners, and every argument we ever had. After the fall at the clinic, I slipped it off because my fingers had swollen, and the nurse with the kind eyes told me not to risk cutting it. I brought it home in the velvet box like a secret, and planned to wear it again when the swelling went down. I should have put it in the bank. I did not. So when I opened the box that morning and saw only the hollow where the ring slept, something inside me sat down and folded its arms the way my mother would when she had decided a thing and wanted God to acknowledge it. I called the agency. The woman who answered had a voice like early morning radio. "Security concerns are taken very seriously," she said. "We'll review." "Did you misplace the items?" "I misplaced my glasses," I said. "Not the last 30 years of my life." She suggested I ask my family. She suggested grief can make a person scatter. She promised a supervisor would call. No one called. I called Lev. He came with his toolbox, even though I told him I only needed his good sense. He stood at my dresser, touching nothing, and whistled a low bird sound. "You're sure?" he asked. Because men of his generation are taught to ask that question, even when the answer is burned into the air. "Yes," I said. "Then we treat this like a job," he said, switching off the emotion the way he used to switch off power to a line before he handled it. "What do we know?" "We know she had keys," I said. "We know the hallway camera can see my door. We know the downstairs door logs fob entries. We know she was here when the ring was here and here when it wasn't." He nodded. "Call the superintendent about the locks. I'll talk to the security company about footage. And your daughter?" "She set this up," I said carefully. "She wants me safe. She will want me soft." He didn't argue. He knew daughters. He has one who visits him twice a year with yogurt and guilt. "I'll ask my friend," he said. "Retired police." Not a favor, just advice I called my lawyer too, because there are two numbers an older woman should memorize the way she once memorized recipes. The person who turns words into walls and the person who turns locks into doors. My lawyer, Marta, is 66, spends her lunch hour walking laps around a small park and signs her emails with an owl. She answered on the second ring. "You did the right thing calling me," she said. "File a report. Don't accuse anyone by name yet. Gather, keep breathing, make copies of your inventory, email me what you have, and stop being ashamed of being helped." "Who said I was ashamed?" I asked. "You did," she said, with your silence between words. After I hung up, I did the small things that make a person feel less like a victim and more like a person with a plan. I changed the locks. I set a chair under the doorknob because my husband used to do that when storms woke him and he wanted to feel a little foolish and a little safer. I taped a note to the back of the dresser drawer. Checked, photographed, counted. I took the little bag from the freezer and held the pills in my palm until the cold bit me. I put them back. I wrote Marina a note for when she came the next day. "We will meet in the kitchen, keys to be returned." She came at noon. She let herself in and then saw the chair under the knob, saw me at the table with the note, and paused. "You changed the locks," she said, as if I had dyed my hair blue without consulting her. "I did," I said. "Keys." "I need a set to do my job," she said. "You need to ring the bell to do your job," I answered. "Keys." She smiled in that careful way. "You're upset." "I understand. When we're frightened, we sometimes—" "Keys," I said again. And my voice surprised us both. It had the weight of someone standing behind me. She placed the keys on the table, one finger at a time, as if the metal might bruise the wood. "I'm sorry you feel unsafe," she said. "Perhaps a different carer would—" "Where is my ring?" I asked. "I don't know," she said. The without. "I'll help you" look stayed unspoken in the room and looked uglier because of it. "I filed a report," I said. "The police will want to speak to you." Her eyebrows climbed. "The police? Over a misplaced ring?" "Over the theft of a wedding ring, pearl earrings, a silver cross, and 2 brooches," I said. "And over your attempt to adjust my medication." She laughed then, a real laugh this time, surprised out of her. "You're imagining things." I slid a printed photograph across the table. My ring on my finger the day before my fall, my hand flour dusted from rolling dough, my husband's hand under mine. Next to it, my inventory, the line numbers like stitches. Imagine this, I said. Her eyes flicked from paper to me and back. She had the look I've seen on cats when a bird turns out to be a mirror. I'll talk to my supervisor, she said. You do that, I said. And tell your supervisor that Lev is talking to the security company and that I have an appointment with the agency director tomorrow morning. You should rest, she said. I'll rest when I have my ring back, I answered, and when your face is no longer the last thing my trust ever saw. After she left, the apartment felt larger, air pulling into corners it hadn't reached for days. I washed the broth pot, I put the chair back where it belongs, I made tea and let it go cold. I watched the hallway camera on my phone because Lev had somehow accomplished this with a link and a shrug. When the elevator doors opened, I saw her glance at the lens and turn her face away like a child who thinks closing her eyes makes her disappear. At midnight, my phone buzzed, a text from a number not in my contacts. We should talk, don't bring anyone. Cafe across from agency at 10. I didn't sleep. I lay on my back, ribs complaining, and watched the streetlight paint the ceiling. Who reaches out at midnight to a woman they think is weak? A nurse? A supervisor? A conscience too late to matter? What do they hope I'll leave at home when I come alone? My courage or my memory? In the morning, I dressed like my mother when she went to the bank. Good jacket, sensible shoes, lipstick like armor. I put my papers into a folder cleaned of gas bills. I tucked a small recorder into my pocket that Lev swore was legal. In this country, he said, if you are in the conversation, you can keep it. He said it with a grim mischief that made him look like a boy again. I left the cats their breakfast, told them to say nothing, and went out. The cafe was the kind of place that thinks coffee requires an essay. I chose a table near the window, backs to walls like my husband taught me. A woman slid into the chair opposite me. Mid-40s, hair cut like efficiency, suit that wanted to be more expensive than it was. Her eyes were tired and unkind. I'm Anya, she said, operations manager at Brightbridge Home Care. You called yesterday. I did, I said. I'm here to resolve this, she said, quietly. You're here to make me go away, I said. That is different. Her mouth made that careful smile. We take any allegation seriously. Marina has an impeccable record. You're under stress. Post-fall cognitive decline. Is not a diagnosis, I said. It is a wish you have. She leaned in. Do you have proof? Because if you do not, accusing our employee is defamation, and if you involve the police, we will involve our lawyers. These things can be messy. Your employee didn't just take jewelry, I said. She tried to alter my medication. 2 extra benzodiazepines on Monday, which I will not take, a miscount yesterday, a report from me to my doctor at noon, video footage of her entering and leaving my apartment while I was on bed rest, and a printed schedule of her visits that does not match your clock-in records. Anya's eyes sharpened. How do you know our records? Because your employees scan a QR code at my doors, I said. Because your schedule texts my daughter and my daughter sends them to me. Because Lev is friends with the building manager who does not appreciate people propping open the downstairs door with a brick. She took a breath that tasted like surrender. What do you want, Mrs. Kovalenko? I want my ring back, I said. I want the rest returned. I want a written acknowledgement from your agency that items were removed under your employee's supervision and returned. And I want a letter of apology. Then I want you to leave my life. And if that is not possible, then I want your license. I said, and her license, in the name of the person you sell locks to when you look the other way. The smile slipped. That is a serious accusation. So is drugging a client, I said. So is theft. We vet our employees, she said weakly. Marina is not her name, I said then, because yesterday evening I had searched my brain for everything that did not feel right. The way she held the clipboard like a prop, the quick glance at my dresser, the smiling without the eyes. I told Lev. He made 2 calls. At 10 p.m., he rang my bell with a printout. The woman assigned to my case had a different surname on her license. The photo did not match. The license had lapsed last year. Anya's face told me she already knew. We had a staffing issue, she said. We subcontract in emergencies. Then you subcontracted a thief, I said. How many others has she visited? We will look into it, she said. In the meantime, I interrupted, I have already filed a report. Marta's sending letters this morning. If you want this quiet, you will gather my things quickly and you will not touch my medical file again. She stared at me as if I had reshaped in front of her. Not old woman, not fog, not a house to be emptied. I'll call you by 2, she said finally. At 1:30, the superintendent texted. She is in the hallway. I stood at the peephole and watched Marina, if that was her name, standing too straight, smiling too hard, a paper bag in her hands. She knocked. I opened the door with the chain on. I brought your things, she said, showing the bag as if it were a gift. Put them on the floor, I said. Step back. She did. I lifted the chain and opened the door. The bag was heavy, with little boxes, with the metallic clink that makes a chest tighten. I set it on the table and did not open it. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, she said. Misunderstanding? I asked. Which part did I fail to understand? Things can get misplaced, she said, when people are recovering, when routines change. Are my socks misplaced too, like? I asked. Because I found them folded inside out, the way I don't fold them. Explain that to me. Explain the apartment key I gave you appearing on a ring with 3 others, one of which belongs to the building across the street. She had no answer. I didn't expect one. She turned as if to go, a movement too practiced, and I saw the glint at her wrist. My bracelet, the one with the tiny hinge that only I can press. I had not listed it because I wear it when I sleep, like some people wear the idea of sleep. I had slipped it off the night of the fall and tucked it under a book where dust made a small halo around it. I had not thought to check. Wait, I said, and let the weight of the word drop all the way down the hall. You forgot something. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, a calculation done quickly and badly. This is mine, she said, touching the bracelet. Gift from my mother. I walked forward. She took a step back. The chain clicked behind me as the door swung shut. Press the hinge, I said. If it opens, it's mine. She pressed. It did not open. You have to press twice in 2 different places. In a rhythm my husband teased me for. I reached and she flinched, and then there was a hand between us. Lev's hand, walnut shell knuckles, where had he come from? And his voice, low and steady. Let the police check, he said, better than arguing in a hallway. She stood very still. I could feel the beating of my heart in my ribs, like a reminder that there is still a drum in the world that belongs to me. The elevator dinged. 2 men in uniform stepped out. In the seconds before they spoke, I thought of all the ways this could go wrong, a grin like Anya's, a suggestion to be reasonable, a glance at my age that explained everything away. But one officer looked at my face first, not the list in his hand. Mrs. Kovalenko? He asked. Yes, I said. We're here about your report, he said. May we come in? I nodded. Marina tried to follow. Lev stepped aside just enough to say, without saying, that only people I wanted crossed my threshold. The younger officer, cheeks still round with youth, asked for the bag. I handed it to him and stepped back to the table, to my chair, to the place where women have made stands. Since chairs were invented, they opened the boxes, the ring, my ring, slept in its hollow like someone who has been returned to her own bed. The pearls blinked, the cross lay quiet. 2 brooches sat like birds, a 3rd box held a pair of earrings I did not recognize. These are mine, Marina said quickly, pointing at the earrings. We'll sort that at the station, the older officer said. He turned to me. Do you wish to file a formal complaint? My mouth was dry. I looked at the ring and thought of my husband's hand. I looked at the bracelet at her wrist and thought of my own wrist, naked at night. Yes, I said. I wish to file everything. They led her away. She did not look back. Lev closed the door and stood with his back to it as if his body could be a bolt. I took my ring out of its box and slid it onto my finger. The diamond found the light. The house grew quiet in the way a house does when it returns to itself. The agency sent Anya with a letter that afternoon. The letter said words without warmth, regrettable, misunderstanding, cooperating. Marta called. "Keep the letter," she said. "We'll need it." "Will they charge her?" I asked. "They will try," she said, "if they can link the items and the intent." "If you have the bracelet," "I have everything but the bracelet," I said. "It was on her wrist." She left without it. "Then we have a witness," Marta said. "Say hello to Lev for me." That night, I slept for the first time in a week. I woke to the sound of the radiator whispering to itself and the scent of coffee I had set to brew at 6 because old habits get up before we do. I made toast. I wore my ring to butter it. I laughed when I realized I had wiped butter across the diamond. I licked my thumb and wiped it clean. At 9, the phone rang. A man's voice, unhurried, with that careful politeness some men wear because it has kept them out of trouble. "Mrs. Kovalenko, this is Sergeant Borodin. I'm following up on the report. We took the caregiver into custody yesterday, but she was not carrying identification, and the name she gave does not match her fingerprints. We'd like you to come in and identify your property and answer a few questions." "I'll be there at 10, I said. "May I bring a friend?" "You may," he said. Lev put on a tie and looked like someone whose hands only remembered work when they were empty. We walked slowly, my ribs reminding me of the fall with each step, as if to say, "Don't forget why this matter began." The station smelled like dust and coffee and the little despair people leave on chairs. A woman at the desk took my name and my hand shook as I wrote. Old hands shake for many reasons: rage, sorrow, mornings. I told mine to be still, and it wasn't, but I wrote anyway. Sergeant Borodin met us with a firm nod. He had the look of a man who has learned that listening is as much a part of his job as speaking. He led us to a room with a table and photographs spread in rows: my ring, my pearls, my cross, the brooches, the bracelet. "Is this yours?" he asked. "It is," I said. "And this?" he asked, pointing to the bracelet. "It is," I said. He looked at Lev. "You saw the bracelet on the suspect's wrist?" "Yes," Lev said. "We all did." Borodin made a note. "The suspect claims she was returning found items." "Found where?" I asked, and the anger in my voice made Lev put his hand on the table as if to lend me the solidity of wood. "In a bag," Borodin said. "In your apartment." "She took the bag when I was asleep," I said. "She took my keys to take my ring to make me sleep more." "We found a key-cutting receipt in her purse," he said. 2 copies made. We're working with the agency, but the agency is—" He paused, looking for a word that meant slippery without sounding naive. "The agency is being cautious." "Cautious means unhelpful," Lev said. "Cautious means they have a lawyer," I said. Borodin's mouth twitched. "Yes." I signed a form. I signed another. He let me hold my bracelet. He did not let me wear it home. "Evidence, he said, "once the case moves." "How long?" I asked. He gave me a number instead of an answer. "I will call you," he said. I left the station feeling both victorious and robbed. The ring was back. The ring was not on my hand because now it belonged to a chain of custody. The bracelet had seen my wrist again and then gone. The cross looked at me from a photograph. Justice, I realized, asks for patience. Revenge prefers speed. Which one did I want? Which one would keep another woman's ring from leaving her finger? On the way home, Lev walked half a step behind me like a shadow. "Coffee?" he asked when we reached the building. "Come," I said. "I'll make cake." "I can stir slowly." He sat at my table and looked embarrassed about it because men like him still think the kitchen is something they visit, not something they deserve. I stirred batter while he told me about his friend from the police and his friend's friend and how sometimes things disappear into lockups like they never were. "I want to be useful," he said suddenly, and it sounded like a confession. You are, I said. Not just to you, he said. In general, I'm tired of reading the paper and muttering. I'm tired of fixing only toasters while bigger things break. Then help me fix this, I said. Not just for me. He nodded. We make noise? We make proof, I said. Then we make noise. Anya called that afternoon. We have placed the caregiver on leave, she said, as if she were offering a gift. You have placed a thief where thieves go, I said. Will you give me names of the clients she has visited this month? That would violate privacy, she said. Privacy protected her while she stole from me, I said. I would like to protect someone else. I cannot, she said. But if a court orders it, then a court will order it, I said, and your agency's name will be on the order. The next morning, 2 women knocked on my door, one tall with hair like steel wool, the other compact and watchful. I'm Tanya, the tall one said, showing a card. Adult Protective Services, this is Oksana. We received a referral, she did not say from whom. I'm not a victim, I said, because pride sometimes speaks before sense. Victim is a word we use, Oksana said gently, not a word you have to carry. They came in. They asked questions that felt like a quiz about my life. Who helps you with bills? Where are your medications? Who has keys? Do you have a plan if someone tries to make you do something you don't want to do? Yes, I said. Say no. Call Marta. They nodded. They looked at my pill organizer. They looked at the little bag in the freezer and did not ask what it was. We hear things about agencies, Tanya said. We hear them too late. If you're willing, we'd like to connect you with others. Sometimes when one woman speaks, another listens. Do women listen? I asked. Or do their daughters listen? Or the men who call themselves sons-in-law? Sometimes the building cat listens first, Oksana said, and surprised me into laughing. They left with permission to use my name. They left with a copy of my inventory. They left me with a feeling like standing at the top of a staircase, knowing I will go down it one step at a time because there is something at the bottom I need. That night, the phone rang again. You don't know me, a voice said. My aunt has been very upset. She told me about the ring. She told me your name. She told me you're making trouble. Who is your aunt? I asked. Silence. Then, it doesn't matter. Leave it alone. You got your things back. Not all, I said, and not every woman did. A click. A dial tone that sounded like dismissal. I wrote down the time and number. Lev took the paper without comment. The next day, the building's hallway camera showed a man at my door at 3 a.m., a baseball cap pulled low. He tried the knob. He tried the door of 4B, then 4C. He leaned toward the lens, and the camera blinked, as if embarrassed to be seen looking back. The superintendent sent the footage to the police. I watched it again and again, the precise way the man tried the handle without rattling, as if he cared about not waking anyone up. Professional respect for sleep. When you know you are being hunted, you learn the animals around you, the creak of the stair at the landing that isn't your step, the shadow that moves differently from the curtain, the unkindness in a voice that calls you dear. People who have not been hunted do not understand how much of being alive is noticing little things and naming them before they eat you. Marta called. The court granted a preliminary order, she said. Brightbridge must provide a list of clients serviced by the individual using the name Marina for the past 60 days. Also, their staffing practices are under review. Will they obey? I asked. They will pretend to, she said. It's a start. Also, the prosecutor has filed charges. Unlawful entry, possession of stolen property, attempted poisoning. Attempted poisoning? I repeated. The words felt like too big a coat. The pills, she said. We talked to your doctor. He wrote a statement. I kept 2 pills, I said. In the freezer. You always were good at saving things, she said, and the smile in her voice warmed me all the way through. The agency released the list. Marta sent it to me with a note. It's worse than we thought. 23 names, 23 addresses, 23 women who opened doors and made soup and set chairs under their doorknobs on stormy nights. We began to call. Some didn't pick up, some did and cried. One, a widow named Helena with 3 ringed fingers and a voice like cracked glass, said, my brooch, Blue stones in a circle. Gone. I thought I was old. I thought I lost it. I thought I was losing. We will find it, I said. Because sometimes a promise is not about being sure. It is about being the kind of person who makes promises. Not all the stories were theft. Some were attempts, a bottle of wine to help you sleep left by a caregiver, a social security card photographed for the file, a daughter called by the agency to suggest guardianship for safety. Patterns you don't see until someone draws them. Lev built a notebook, he printed maps, he showed me lines like circuits. "She's not alone, Hoasaa," he said. "This is not one clever thief. This is a crew with a script. Who writes their script?" I asked. Who taught Marina to hold a clipboard like that? Who taught Anya to smile with unkind eyes? He had no answer. I did not expect one. Men like Lev are good with wires. Men like Lev hate the part of a problem that is human. The prosecutor called. "We have a hearing," she said. "Bail." I went. I sat in the back, hands folded, ring absent because it lived in a locker with other evidence. When the woman they called by a name that wasn't hers walked in, she looked smaller and angrier. She wore a sweater that wanted to be gentle but had given up. She didn't look at me. She looked at the door. The judge listened, eyebrows like parentheses. The defense talked about misunderstandings and stress. The prosecutor talked about evidence and patterns. The judge set bail and conditions, no contact, no caregiving work, surrender of passports. The woman's mouth tightened. Someone in the back row exhaled, and the sound hit my bones like the chair had. On the way out, in the hallway, a woman stopped me. 40, maybe, hair in a messy knot, eyes the color of sleepless coffee. "My mother," she said. They sent that woman to my mother. My mother misplaces things. Now I don't know what she misplaced and what was taken. What do I do? "You make a list," I said. "You check pawn shops, you talk to jewelers, you ask the building for footage, you help her remember by handing her the things in her house and saying their names. You call Marta, and you do not call your mother confused, you call her careful." She nodded like someone who had been given a task instead of a sentence. Days became a pattern of calls and lists and waiting. Adult Protective Services gathered stories. The prosecutor built a case like a nest. Lev fixed the light over my sink and didn't charge me. I baked a cake that tasted like relief and looked like nothing much. I saw the world as I have always seen it, a series of pages you turn even when your hands shake. Then came the call I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. "We think we found where the pieces go," Borodin said. "A pawn shop on Velika Street. The owner is chatty when he thinks he won't be punished. He described a woman selling small things that look like heirlooms. He remembered a bracelet with a tricky hinge. He bought it?" I asked. "He took a photograph," he said. "He sends pictures to a buyer who deals in estate jewelry. The buyer collects. We're tracing the buyer. Today, we're visiting the shop. Would you like to come?" "Yes," I said, and was already in my coat. The shop is a narrow mouth on a busy street. Bells that would make you think of Christmas if you were a different person jangle when you enter. The man behind the counter wore a beard that looked glued on and eyes that darted to every corner without moving his head. Borodin's presence made him oily with politeness. "We have questions," Borodin said, "about purchases from a woman like this." He held up a photograph of Marina in the hallway, lifted from the camera. The owner squinted, Soul pretending to squint with him. "Not sure," he said. "We see many." Borodin slid a paper across. The owner's eyes fell into the maze of official stamps. He sighed. "Maybe," he said. "She had a bracelet. Difficult closure. She said her grandmother died. She said she needed cash." I picked up a magnifying glass from the counter and held it like a judge holds a gavel. "Did you buy it?" "I took a photo," he said. "I sent it to my guy. He said he'd take it if the gold was good. She didn't come back. She sent a man." "When?" Borodin asked. 3 nights ago," he said. "Late." The man put the photograph on the counter, the bracelet's hinge making a small shadow that only I would recognize as a fingerprint from a life. The buyer's number was on the back. Borodin wrote it down with a patience that looked like boredom and was not. The buyer turned out to be a name attached to a mailbox attached to a woman who rented space in a co-working office that smelled like coffee and anxious youth. She was in antiques and often on the go. We went, she wasn't there. We came back the next day, she wasn't there. On the third day, I told Borodine I could help. I've been buying and selling and keeping and giving away things for 50 years, I said. I know how people who love objects talk. They think they are choosing objects. The objects are choosing them. He raised an eyebrow, that masculine motion that accepts help without saying so. I called the number. I have a piece you might like, I said when she answered, voice bright and brisk. Estate bracelet, difficult closure, good gold. I don't want to go to a shop. Who gave you my number? She asked. I'm old, I said. We tell each other everything. She laughed, charmed by her own charm. Send a photo, she said. I sent a photograph of my bracelet from before the fall. I'd rather show you in person, I wrote. I don't want the wrong eyes on it. She texted an address, a cafe near the market. 2 p.m., bring what you have. I was nervous. I wore my jacket. I wore my ring because the ring belonged to some, whether it sat in an evidence locker or on my hand. It lived in my bones while the metal lived elsewhere. Lev insisted on walking me. Borodine insisted on sitting at a nearby table with a newspaper he failed to read. This is how you grow old with courage, by arranging the furniture of risk so that you can sit on it without falling. She arrived on time. Late 30s, expensive jeans, haircut to look effortless, eyes quick and appreciative when they fell on objects. I'm Nadia, she said, and did not offer a card. Let's see. I set a box on the table. Inside was a different bracelet, mine's twin in photograph only, bought last summer at a market for the price of peaches. The hinge was easy. The gold was not gold. It looked good to a photograph and very good to a person who wanted to believe. I watched her see what she wanted. Lovely, she said, fingers quick. I can do 500. It's worth more, I said mildly. 200, she countered. All business. It was a test. I let her think she had won. Fine, I said. Cash. She reached for her bag. Borodine stood up. Lev pretended to read. Nadia counted bills, the paper scratching the table. Do you have anything else? She asked. Rings, brooches, pearls. I had a ring, I said. But I like to keep my promises. To whom? She asked, distracted by her own greed. To my husband, I said, and the words hit the air like a bell in a quiet church. She looked up then and saw not a seller but a woman who had weighed what she had against what she had lost and chosen. She lifted her chin. If you find anything else, she said, call me. She slid a napkin across the table with a number. Use this one. Borodine picked it up. I will, he said, folding the napkin like someone folding a confession. 2 nights later, they took Nadia in while she was cataloging things she did not own. The pawn shop owner hummed like a refrigerator trying to remember its vocation. The police took photographs. Boxes were opened. Helena's blue-stoned brooch blinked up at the ceiling. A little gold locket with a curl inside slept in tissue paper. The inventory multiplied like kindness. Evidence moved slowly. Courts moved slower. In the waiting, something changed. Anya resigned for personal reasons. The agency issued an apology so carefully worded it apologized for nothing. Tanya, from Adult Protective Services, called me weekly with updates about women who had been repaid in kind and those who had been repaid with attention only. Lev learned to use a spreadsheet. He taught me how to organize names by street. He bought a scanner and scanned my inventory because he is the kind of man who finds comfort in neat rows. One afternoon, while we were working at my table and I was trimming the dead ends from a plant, my phone lit. Lilia. I almost let it go to voicemail, resentment like a stone in my throat. Then I remembered the day in the clinic, her face on my phone, pleading. And I answered. Mama, she said, voice small. I heard about the police. Why didn't you call me? I called you the day I fell, I said. I was on a plane, she said. I was in a meeting. There was a deadline. There is always a deadline, I said. and regretted the cruelty as soon as it left my tongue. I thought the agency was safe, she said. I checked reviews. Reviews are for restaurants, I said, not for the people who take your keys. I wanted to help, she whispered. I know, I said softer. You did help. You also put me in a stranger's hands. Both can be true. She cried then, the quiet kind of crying that makes older women reach for a cloth the way they once reached for a newborn. I'm coming this weekend, she said. You don't have to, I said. Yeah, but you can. She came. She brought groceries I didn't need and flowers that smelled like missing the point. She cleaned my fridge badly. She opened drawers and apologized to paper and spoons. Saturday night, she took my hand and looked at the ring. I remember when Dad gave you this, she said. I was 4. I thought the diamond was a tiny piece of ice that wouldn't melt. It melted and then froze again, I said. That is marriage. She laughed through the last of her tears. Why didn't you tell me when things first started feeling wrong? Because I wanted you to be my daughter, I said, not my guard. She slept on the sofa and snored like a little boat bumping a dock. Sunday morning, we walked to the flea market because I wanted to see if the world still offered more objects than losses. We bought a tin bread box with roses on the lid. We bought a book of poems for 3 coins. We bought a tiny brass key that opens nothing and keeps secrets anyway. The trial came in the spring when the trees outside the courthouse shook off their gray like an old coat. The woman they had called Marina was now called by the name on her fingerprint file. She had 2 children, it turned out, a husband who drove a taxi at night, a mother who needed medication. None of this made me kinder. Some things do not weigh against other things. The courtroom smelled of wood and disinfectant. The prosecutor spoke like she was building a staircase she needed us to climb. The defense tried to suggest confusion, mine, the agency's, the world's. Lev testified. He told the court about the bracelet on the wrist. Tanya testified, explaining patterns with a voice that could have soothed a storm. The pawn shop owner squirmed. Nadia stared at a point beyond all of us. Anya did not appear. When it was my turn, I stood. I told the story in a straight line. Fall, nurse, keys, ring, bag, bracelet, call, trap. I did not cry. I did not perform. I did not soften the edge of my voice for anyone. When the defense suggested that I had been confused, I said I confuse my cat's names. I do not confuse theft with tidying. The courtroom laughed a little and then stopped, sobered by the look on my face. When they asked if I wanted to see the bracelet, I said no. I wanted to see it when I could walk out with it. I left the ring without asking because some rituals keep their power by not needing your permission. Verdict, guilty on 3 counts, not guilty on 2, hung on 1. The judge gave a sentence that tried to be both mercy and message. I do not know which message was heard. After, in the hallway, Nadia passed me. Her eyes met mine and looked away. You should be ashamed, she muttered, not stopping. Of what? I asked. Of keeping what belongs to me? Of ruining a life, she said, and kept walking. I wanted to say, she ruined her own life. I wanted to say, how many women slept without their rings because of you? Instead, I said nothing, because silence has its own gravity, and sometimes that is enough. The agency changed its name in summer. A logo grew a leaf. A website shed awkward sentences the way snakes shed skin. Women still needed help. Women still opened their doors. Lev joined a group that teaches people to write down what they own, who has keys, who to call. He stood in front of a room of old men and old women and said, "You are not paranoid if you have a list." And they wrote that down as if it were a new commandment. Lilia visited more, not much, but more. We learned to speak without both of us pretending we were someone else. Sometimes she brought her daughter and we cooked and made a mess and the cat judged us and all was as near to good as it has been in a long time. One evening, late, I stood at the stove and looked at the hook where my keys hang now on a ring with a leather fob my husband gave me when we were poor and thought leather was a luxury. I thought of the first day Marina walked in, of the way I handed over the keys like a woman handing a cup to a thirsty person. I thought of the ring sleeping in a box in my dresser. Back from its little exile, I thought of the women whose brooches still wait in drawers across the city for fingers that will not come. And I asked myself the question that comes when the hunt ends. Was it revenge I wanted? Or repair? What did I build in all my pointed anger besides a fence around my own house? That night, I wrote a letter. It was addressed to no one, and to all the women whose daughters are busy and whose neighbors water plants and whose hearts beat stubbornly under old ribs. It said, write it down, photograph it, call it by its name, give keys only with a receipt, trust slowly, watch everything. Be kind, but do not be easy. Say no, like a door closing. Say yes, like a window opening. Teach the girls to press the hinges twice. The next morning, I put on my bracelet, the hinge pressed under my fingers in the rhythm my husband teased me for. I slid the ring on, I added the cross. I looked like a woman wearing her own life instead of carrying it to a pawn shop. At noon, there was a knock. Lev, holding a plant. It's supposed to clean the air, he said, a little embarrassed. It also makes a house look lived in, I said. Come in. He placed the plant on the table, exactly where the bag had been months ago. We stood looking at it like two people who had built something from instructions and wanted it to make sense. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't fallen? I asked. I think you would have fallen later, he said, onto a different floor. I boiled water. I made tea that we drank too hot. We sat and listened to the building breathe. In the hallway, a child ran and was caught and laughed. The sound traveled up the stairwell and through my bones. There are stories where the thief repents and stories where the victim forgives. This is not that story. This is a story where a woman kept her dignity by counting it like coins in her hand, and a man who used to fix wires learned to fix something without a plug, and a daughter learned that showing up is a verb, not a plan. This is a story in which the hinge clicks and the door closes and the window opens, and an old woman goes to the market and buys plums and a jar and makes jam without standing on a chair. This is a story where you cannot have my keys. Months later, I was stopped on the street by a woman with quick eyes and a scarf tied the way my mother used to. Are you the one? She asked. The one with the ring? I am, I said. She took my hand, squeezed, and let go. I checked my drawers, she said. I found my grandmother's brooch in a scarf I never wear. I was sure it was stolen. I was sure I was losing my mind. Now I keep a list. I put my spare keys at my son's with a note. I sleep, I'm glad, I said. Did you ever get this bracelet? She asked, curious without malice. I touched my wrist. I did. She nodded like that answered something for her about the world. Good, she said, and went on. In the evenings, when the light has that particular mercy of late day and shows you everything softer than it is, I sit by the window with my tea and watch the door to the building. People come, people go. Some carry groceries, some carry their lives in small bags. The cats make speeches in the yard and tell me nothing I don't know. Sometimes I see a nurse in the uniform of a new agency, head bent, patient beside her. I do not think all help is a hand into a drawer. I do think that keys weigh what you make them weigh. The jam boils, the plant grows, even though I forget to turn it. The hinge clicks twice when I need reminding. And when the phone rings and a friend of a friend of a friend says, my mother, I put on my jacket, I pick up my folder that used to say gas bills, and I go. Because once you have been hunted and survived, you look for women in the grass and you say, come. We'll stand up together, we'll go back to the beginning and turn different there. The day we returned to the police station to reclaim what belonged to me, the evidence clerk checked everything against a list as if each item had a passport. He set the bracelet on the counter last, as if he wanted to remember the feel of it. I pressed the hinge twice, the rhythm I could do in my sleep, and it opened. The diamond in the ring caught light. The cross lay against my palm with familiar weight. I signed my name, each letter, the age it is. I walked home slowly, Lev beside me, carrying the little paper bag like it contained fireworks. People passed us. No one knew we were the ones who had turned back one small tide. At home, I put the ring where it belongs. I put the bracelet where it belongs. I put the cross around my neck, and it settled in the place it always finds. The small dip I did not know I had until I started carrying the memory of weight. I hung my keys on the hook by the stove and stood looking at them for a moment, not because they are beautiful, but because they are mine. Sometimes now I think of Marina, I think of the way she held the clipboard, I think of her children who will have to learn the hinge of trust the hard way. I do not forgive her. I practice living so well that her taking becomes the last interesting thing she did in my life. And when my granddaughter comes to visit and asks me, as children do, why I always touch my bracelet twice before I sleep, I tell her, because everything important opens when you know where to press, and because I love the sound a hinge makes when it still works.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.